helping to mitigate some of the economic impact of this crisis, and it will continue to be vital as our businesses seek to rebuild. And I want to again today give an assurance that the Scottish Government is determined to do everything we can to support that process of rebuilding and recovery. We will continue to do everything possible to protect your livelihoods. That's important in the short term, but it is also vital to help lay the groundwork for a sustainable economic recovery.
A sustainable recovery. You could presume it was coincidental to include the word sustainable within her little podium speech. But before presuming that it is a coincidence, be sure to remember that this is the same woman who made Scotland one of the first countries to sign up to the Sustainable Development Goals upon taking over from Alex Salmons. And as I pointed out on multiple videos now, the concept of a new normal, which they continuously speak about, seems to tie in rather nicely with the announcement that was made just a few weeks before the so-called pandemic initially hit. The guy in charge of the UN, in January time, made a call for acceleration. The Decade of Action, it was called. In 2020, we enter a new decade of action, where national governments and stakeholders need to speed up activities and deliver towards implementing the SDGs by 2030. It has widely been acknowledged that one way to accelerate those activities would be the creation of regional civil society hubs to enhance the participation of all stakeholders, both at regional forums and global levels. More than ever, people and countries everywhere rely on the United Nations, apparently, to rise to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, a so-called human crisis with a mortality rate of under 1%. 0.27 is the latest study suggests. But the Secretary General has emphasised that the creativity of the response must match the unique nature of the crisis, and the magnitude of the response must match its scale. Moving ahead on the Decade of Action for SDG implementation, the recovery from the COVID-19 is an opportunity for governments and stakeholders alike to build back better their societies. How very convenient! It's all starting to make sense at this point. For anybody that hasn't caught on yet, these aren't mere coincidences. Oh, no. The more that this prolongs, the more that they make a fool of themselves at their podiums, the more it becomes rather evident, as far as I'm concerned, that these patterns that are emerging, the rhetoric that's been espoused and the suggestions that are being put forth, are all in tandem with one another. They're all for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. They're all doing as instructed and preparing for their Decade of Action. A sustainable recovery sounds rather like Sustainable Development Goal 8. Promotes sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment and decent work for all. Now, where have we heard this before? We'll get to that. On the UN's website, they have a description of Sustainable Goal 8. The action has 3 objectives. Strengthen the profile of trade unions as development actors in their own right. Presumably that could apply to commissions as well. Promote the central role that SDG 8 and the Decent Work Agenda plays as a direct contributor to achieve other SDGs within the 2030 Agenda. And number 3, the 2030 Agenda brings about radical changes that wouldn't have been able to be brought about if it wasn't for said crisis. How convenient. And how the world is steered, hence the world of labour needing a new social contract that reorganises the role of economy and finance as a means to contribute to addressing people's needs and a sustainable way of living, working, producing and consuming. Well, for the 3rd time now I'm referring back to this cancerous Social Justice Commission because there's quite a few things included within this article that are repeated in Sustainable Development Goal 8's description. As it mentions here, our remit as a commission is to produce a route map to the real prize of so-called independence. A new social contract between our government and our citizens. A social contract that will build an inclusive, rights-based society where everyone is cared for and supported. A social contract. The clock is ticking for a new social contract. Reorganising the role of economy and finance as a means to contribute to addressing people's needs. So moving away from the idea of GDP and profit and whatnot to focus on well-being, you could say. Our ambitions as we recover from the pandemic is constrained only by what we collectively consider is achievable and desirable. Our new normal must deliver a better way of living for everyone, one that also protects our environment, as our fortunes are bound to the health of our planet. On the website for Time for 8, it says here, ensuring a just transition for climate ambition. Climate change and the deteriorating capacity of our planet to sustain life cannot be ignored. The devastation from the pandemic will require new levels of care, social protection and of economic stimulus in all countries. The same is true of the non-existent man-made climate crisis, which has 10 years to conveniently stabilise the planet and see a global reduction of 45% of emissions, which have conveniently all been put on hold. probably to be phased out now as a result of said lockdown and the policies to follow after the fact. As many jobs will have to evolve or be replaced by new ones, workers must be given the skills and support they need to thrive in this new world of work. Of course, recovery plans must put people and planet first, with just transition as a way to support workers. SDG 8 is all about ensuring all workers are socially just, transition to a zero carbon economy for generations to come. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought a crisis of unprecedented significance on public health, or people's health, jobs and lives globally. Governments must take extraordinary and radical measures to overcome the emergency and to lay the groundwork for the recovery. A piecemeal approach clearly does not fit the purpose. On the contrary, systemic change based on interlinked and complementary policies at social, economic and environmental levels is the way forward. This is why today the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals are relevant more than ever. They provide the vision and show the path towards resilient economies and inclusive and just societies. Oh, such cancer. But a coincidence? Recovery measures and investments must be in line with the SDGs to be lasting. SDG 8 is key to address the social and economic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, hence all the talk about disproportionately affected communities, etc., as well as a multitude of other things. Through its targets on workers' protection, decent work and social protection and inclusive growth, Goal 8 drives the 2030 Agenda forward and plays a fundamental role in trade unions' call for a new social contract between governments, businesses and workers. Another one on their list of 8 reasons for 8 is ensuring income support and access to health and care for all workers through universal social protection. Millions of jobs will be lost and millions of people will be pushed into poverty as they will not have the money to feed themselves and their families thanks to our lockdowns. Employment benefits and compensation arrangements are key to ensuring workers' income security to provide them access to healthcare in line with the Convention 102 on social protection. It's urgent to put in place a universal social protection system covering all workers regardless of their contractual status, such as self-employment and platform economy workers. We have been considering a universal basic income as a means to provide the safety net as well as a mechanism that values unpaid work such as caring or volunteering. The current situation is understandably fueling demands for universal basic income. The bigger question to resolve going forward are how this could be delivered and at what level, but just as importantly, how a UBI would sit within a wider system of state supports. What use is UBI if the cost of living, including essential services, are too high, that they negate any benefits? UBI is a starting point which must be considered alongside how we provide universal services such as childcare, education, healthcare, etc. The question we need to ask ourselves is what is essential to our well-being, and is it the role of every single one of us to deliver it? Governments are the conduit for this collective will. They're to govern on our behalf according to our priorities. Well, we didn't put you in power to implement these fucking goals. That said, also on a separate page for Goal 8 says the following: more progress is needed to increase employment opportunities, particularly for young people, reduce informal employment and a gender pay gap, and promote safe and secure working environments to create decent work for all. All in the name of inclusion and sustainability, of course. Whereas in the Social Justice Commission's little toolkit or consultation that they put out a couple of weeks ago, they made the claim that they're going to end poverty, apparently, by making the claim that they're going to use the powers of independence, quote unquote, to end poverty, achieve full employment and drive equality for all, including by tackling rural and health inequalities, and will seek reforms that tackle the underlying causes of poverty. It will also look to how we can be a nation that sets a gold standard for equal pay, and creates opportunity for all our young people. That sounds exactly like Goal 8. As well as an expected impact if Goal 8 was successful, in theory, social partners are open to shaping a new social contract that is based on a decent work agenda within which profits stop being a main objective, but shift into a long-term, sustainable approach to making business, employing people, producing, consuming and engaging with the communities which they are established, so moving away from profit or GDP. As they make reference here to a social contract that will build an inclusive rights-based society, because that's what we really fucking need, where everyone is cared for and supported, of course, a namby-pamby nanny state. And it then says, a paragraph down, or 2 paragraphs down even, that the government's commitment to a well-being economy, Rainbow Unicorn Land's well-being economy, yes, where we are focused on the well-being of our society as the performance of our economy, and where we judge our success not just by GDP but by the health and well-being of our nation. The Commission will set out how the proceeds of economic growth in an independent Rainbow Unicorn Land can be shared much more fairly and securely with better outcomes. Oh, it's not sweet. And just to finish this off, SDG 8 is all about leaving no one behind. Oh, where have we heard that before? We want to deliver a Scotland where no one is left behind. Oh.
sustainable economic recovery.
Just a coincidence, I'm sure.